Hello everyone, my name is Paul. Welcome back to the new news. I hope that everyone's having a fantastic day. It's had a wonderful start to the week and a relaxing Sunday. I hope that you, your family, and your friends are safe. And if not, I do hope that you find that safety and security in the very near future. There is a ton of stuff that has happened over the last 48 hours throughout the world. Of course, as many of you are already tracking, there were strikes on Kiev today, which we'll be getting into, as well as many other different events ongoing, not just in Ukraine, but throughout the globe, including in Russia, in the Middle East, and Ethiopia, and even in North America, and in Southeast Asia. So we'll get to all of that as we move through the news here today. The whole point of us doing this is to raise awareness for different situations ongoing throughout the world. Here at the New News, or TNN if you prefer, 100% of everything we do is charity driven. Everything we do here is 100% going to always be for charity. And if you check out the video description below, you're going to see a ton of different charity links down there. Now, we have a bunch that have been submitted by you guys and by the staff, so please keep those coming. We want to be able to add a whole bunch for all over the world and a bunch of different and cover as much of the world and help as many people as physically possible. But if you check out the video description below, you're going to see a ton of different donation links, all of which are for organizations all throughout the world. So whether you're talking about just wanting to support Ukraine or the war ongoing there, or if you're talking about everything ongoing in Southeast Asia, you're talking about natural disasters ongoing throughout the world, it's all covered there. 80% or more of all the donations that these organizations and fundraisers receive will all go directly to their programs, meaning they go to actually helping people, which is one of the things that we vet for, as well as ensuring that they are credible organizations that you can give your money to and know where it's going. And with that, we get ready to roll here into the news. But if you can't give a lot to these organizations, please give a little. If you can't give anything at all, that's okay too. Help us grow this project. The more people that are here and watching the news and becoming aware of what's happening throughout the world, then there's a lot of stuff that we would like to be able to, that the more impact we will have. And so please give us a like, subscribe, let your friends and communities know about us, so that way we can get that impact and help even more people throughout the world as we continue to grow this project. And so, as we get ready to move into the news, please feel free to ask questions and make comments. I am watching the live chat, so that if you're joining us live tonight, so I can address those to the very best of my ability. To give you a little bit of a background on myself, so for those that may not already know, so I am I served in the Marine Corps between 2016 and 2020. I was a corporal, and I served as an O-352 anti-tank missileman, meaning I used the Javelin and the TOW missile launchers. I am a subject matter expert in anti-armor warfare and armor doctrine. I am a fully cross-trained machine gunner. I am a fully cross-trained rifleman. I am a partially cross-trained radio operator, and I'm also a CLS, or Combat Lifesaver Qualified Marine. I did 2 tours to the Middle East. My first tour I did between October of 2017 to March of 2018, where I spent 4.5 months in the country of Syria, providing convoy escorts and assisting combat operations ongoing there in Syria, out of Firebase Ashadadi, there in Al-Hasaka province, and also within the areas of the Deir ez-Zor province, down by the Omar and Conoco gas and oil fields. And then I also spent time, my second deployment, I was once again there between October of 2019 and March of 2020. I was in charge of the Javelin anti-tank team that was attached to Crisis Response Company and the Trap Company coming out of Kuwait. And I was one of the 100 Marines that responded to the Baghdad Embassy complex during the New Year's of 2020 riots, as well as when we revoked the diplomatic immunity of General al-Soleimani of Iran. So I was there at the Baghdad Embassy complex, and I oversaw all the anti-armor operations there at the Baghdad Embassy for the time I was there, which is about a month and a half. And then after that, I went to Saudi Arabia, and I trained Saudi Arabian Marines. They were getting ready to deploy to Yemen to fight the Houthi rebels, and while that conflict was still and is still to an extent ongoing. And so if you have any questions regarding any of my expertise, please feel free to ask them. I will answer them to the best of my ability. But if you ask anything outside of kind of the realms of my expertise, I try to maintain I try to maintain a really good balance, or try to be very well rounded in the knowledge that I have. I'm very interested in a lot of things, history, geopolitics, that kind of stuff in general. So I have studied that quite extensively. So please feel free to ask those questions. I'll answer to the best of my ability. But with anything regarding any of the information I'm giving you, subject matter expert or not, I always implore you as the viewer to please do your own research if you are interested in any of these topics as we go through and cover them. Nothing really goes beyond doing your own research. I mean, we're happy to do our own research for most of these topics, as I am not an expert in everything happening throughout the world. So please, I implore you to do that. Don't just listen to what everyone is saying on the internet, subject matter expert or not. But with that, we get ready to move into the news here. Yes, Fair is pointing out that I am wearing my NAFO merch. Yes, I am wearing my NAFO merch. I am a member of NAFO. What a wonderful group of fellas, let me tell you. Fellas and fellalinas. And for those that may be returning to the channel and may care, you may notice a special guest. We brought a cat tree in here. There's a glass doorway that is sitting right here behind these curtains. So we have our special guest Tally, who's co-hosting with me tonight, which is our family cat. So if you don't want to look at my ugly mug, I guess you can always watch the cat as currently she's cleaning herself. So anyway, as we jump into the news, though, it does get kind of more serious, of course, because today a really big event happened. 1 week after the attacks on Kiev, that really sparked a lot of these pretty big things happening throughout this, when it comes to air defense systems and everything else. What we end up seeing is that Kiev was once again hit today with numerous kamikaze drones, specifically the Shahed 136 systems, which are capable of carrying about 40 kilograms of high explosives that detonate upon impact. They're kamikaze loitering munitions. They're drone systems that cost about 20,000 pounds a piece for UK currency, which is equivalent of anywhere from like $20,000 to $25,000 USD. And so a large number of them, they attacked in a swarm today all across the country. Of the 30 drones meant for Kiev, 25 of them were successfully shot down. At this point, we do know that it hit high-rise apartment buildings from roughly the same area that the missile strikes occurred roughly a week ago. And the death toll at this point, we are tracking at least 3 individuals that have been killed as a result of the strike. One of them being a husband and wife, a very young couple. The wife was reportedly 6 months pregnant at the time, and they were found underneath the rubble, as well as at least one young child. We do not know their identity or age at this time. They are currently searching for more people that are trapped underneath the rubble at this point. Reportedly, what these drones were actually meant to hit, or their purpose, was they are intended to hit civilian locations. They're intended to hit a power plant, gas plants, and water plants that are located in downtown Kiev, and to hit major civilian infrastructure in downtown Kiev, causing a large amount of destruction, and also really bringing down any kind of normality that Kiev has seen over the last few months. We've seen that that's kind of the purpose of these strikes, but we're getting a lot of images of that today as it's coming out. You can see that babushka being carried away by emergency first responders. The Red Cross responded, as well as first responders there from the city itself. These are coming from the United Nations. This is the UNFPA. Once again, it caused a direct hit onto at least one apartment complex. This is coming from the Ukrainian parliament. Once again, rescue efforts are still ongoing for this. There's that babushka once again. And a cat that they ended up rescuing. And treating very good care of, by the way. You can see this poor cat is getting wrapped in a thermal blanket because it's in shock. And you've seen this a couple of times. You've seen these kind of incidents happen a couple of times, and there is a purpose behind it, just beyond the fact of being a good human being, is psychological. Something that happened. If some of you may not be old enough to remember, I am part of the very end of being able to remember this, but the 9/11 or September 11th terror attacks that occurred there in both, it hit D.C. with the Pentagon, it hit the World Trade Centers, Shanksville, Pennsylvania. When rescue dogs were going through the World Trade Center, it came very apparent very quickly in the days and weeks that followed that it turned very much from a rescue recovery effort into a body recovery effort. And there were crew members that would go and lay themselves and kind of like half bury themselves in the rubble of the World Trade Center because the working, the rescue dogs were becoming so depressed because they weren't finding anyone alive. They thought that they were failing. And so these workers would go out and they would bury themselves in the rubble of the World Trade Center, and so that way they could be found alive by these dogs. And it's a psychological thing. You have to remember that there have been so many strikes in Kiev. There have been so many people that have been killed. And it's just turned, it's with these kind of absolute destruction of these buildings completely collapsing on top of people, tons and tons and tons of material, collapsing on top of people, burning people severely, as well as just being, the explosion itself. It's a lot of body recovery, unfortunately. And so saving life, any life, is animal, pet, or a person, even more so, is a psychological thing. It's a morale booster. It's a psychological thing too. So on top of just being a good human person or human being, there is a purpose behind this. Even though for some people it may seem trivial, that's a thing. And it affects animals, the working dogs. It affects people. So yeah, that's a thing. So in case you're wondering, why, they're trying to find people, why are they bothering with the cat? Well, be a good human being, one, and two, it's psychological. You can see parts of the Shahed drone. This is from a Shahed 136. The Shahed 136 is a loitering munition that's built by Iran. It costs about $20,000 pounds, or about anywhere from $20,000 to $25,000 USD, depending on the exchange rate at the time. These are built purposely by Iran. These are loitering munitions. They're kamikaze drones. The point of them is the end of the munition, the end of the drone itself. It has a crush switch and a crush switch detonator on the front of it that it can hang around in the air for hours and hours and hours until it acquires a target, and then it rams into the target, and there's 40 kilograms of high explosive compound in the nose of the aircraft itself, of the drone. That crush switch detonates that high explosives, those high explosive components, and then it therefore destroys itself, but also its target. Relatively cheap as a drone system, but they have a pretty high capacity payload for a kamikaze drone out there on the market. Hunter killer, or the Switchblade drones, the hunter killer drones that the United States has sent are more anti-personnel. These don't nearly have the same amount of charge to them, explosive power to them. They're really anti-personnel, light vehicle, technical kind of munitions as their purpose. And these are definitely 100% meant for really it's a loitering missile, essentially. It's a drone system. They're nicknamed mopeds because they have a very rudimentary motor in them that makes them sound like a moped. They're very loud. They're very obvious when they're coming. but they are effective nonetheless, because even shooting one of these things down, if the nose, the heaviest part of the aircraft, ends up slamming into the ground, it will end up detonating on a target, maybe not the intended target, but as we've seen before, Russia has no problem just striking civilians and claiming it as a victory. The Department of Defense of Ukraine, that is the Shahed 136. There's a smaller version of it that's a little bit more simplistic. It's called the Shahed 131. These are the Shahed 136. Reportedly, Putin has bought an additional 2,000 of these drones. They're launched in 5. They have a rack that they have put together. They launch in 5 sets. 5 drones to a rack, and it came down to everyone and their mother. If there was somebody with a rifle in the city, they were shooting at this thing. The amount of firepower that went to trying to shoot these things down is immense. Every police officer took out their sidearms and their rifles, and they were engaging this thing all over the city. It was quite impressive, the response. Everyone is trying to shoot these things down because they knew what was going to happen. These things are going to hit something, and as we have seen time and time again, they normally hit residential structures and kill a lot of innocent people, which is unfortunately what still happened today. But they understand. Everyone now is watching the sky and trying to shoot these things down with whatever is available. We can see some of the explosion here. Another one of the Shahed strikes. These photos are coming from the AFP News. And you can see this is one of the Shahed 136s. And listen, you can hear everyone shooting at this thing as it's coming down. But take a look. Now, maybe just a coincidence, but it kind of gives that eerie sound. Moped. Obviously it sounds like a moped. It gives a very eerie sound, and that too can be very psychological. For instance, during World War II, the Stuka, the Ju-87 Stuka, used on the front of its landing gear for certain models of the Stuka. They had what's called a Valkyrie siren, which is, you hear it in movies all the time, but it's not the engine. It's actually small propellers on the front of the landing gear of the Stuka. They create a very distinctive sound when it's in a dive, and you can hear this. It's a very psychological thing because there's nothing that sounds in the world like a Stuka diving. Similarly, there's not a whole lot else besides a moped itself that sounds like a Shahed 136 drone coming in overhead and then immediately diving on you. So it's a very psychological thing too in that right. And it's got to be terrifying. I cannot imagine. We have some footage of what it's like to be just the average person in Kiev when this is happening too. We'll get to that. But just look, this is them trying to shoot it down prior to getting to Kiev. And we can see just the immense amount of firepower, like I said, that they're putting into the air. Keep in mind, at least for American munitions, standard rate, and this is pretty standardized throughout the world too, from what I've noticed, is that you have one tracer every 5 rounds. You have about 5. You have, for every 5 rounds, one of them is going to be a tracer. It's called a 4-to-1 ratio. That's about what you're seeing. So just watch how many tracers are being fired at this thing. Now, some things like anti-aircraft guns will have more tracers. They'll have like a 3-to-1 or 2-to-1 ratio. But they won't. But still, it's not every single round being a tracer because it really, really warps the barrel after a bit. But just take a look at the firepower going up here. I mean, it's just an immense amount of firepower going up into the air there. This is coming from police officers in downtown, police officers here in downtown Kiev, who actually went and tried to shoot down. And it looks like they at least partially were successful in shooting down a Shahed 136 drone there while on the bridge. Take a look. And we have more of these being shot down as the night progresses tonight, as this attack really seems to just be continuing. Take a look.
Тут только що збили нахуй щось. Де звук? Походу попали, збили, блядь. Єбать, тупо така ракета нахуй. Вот так от нахуй. Туда його нахуй, сука. Тупо в очко, блядь. В очко. Вибачте, будь ласка. Тут только що збили нахуй щось. Де звук?
At this point, and thank you for Delta Aviation 23 for pointing it out. Right now, we are showing that it would appear that the Luhansk, Zaporizhia, and the Kiev region are all under an active air raid warning. Yes, there have been air raid alarms. Also, as we were talking here, as of about 2 hours ago, Mykolaiv, Sumy, Kharkiv, Poltava, Odessa, Vinnytsia, Dniprovetsk, and Kiev are all under air raid warnings right now. It's all within about the last 3 hours. So it's still ongoing. This has not ended yet. Today's terror is still ongoing as we are speaking. It is still continuing. So they are still under active air raid warnings. It would appear that only really the Zaporizhia, the Luhansk region, which is always under an air raid warning essentially, and the Kiev region right now are really under those threats at this point. Here we have some footage. These are just some what it's like if you're just the average person here in Kiev today. This is what it's like. You are out on the street, you are walking around, and then all of a sudden you are now under attack. This is what it's like. This is the first person perspective of being inside of a terror attack. This is very reminiscent footage of what it would, of what we saw really on 9/11 during these kind of terror attacks that were happening all across the United States. These when people were out and about, tourists had their cameras out. It was kind of before the smartphone. And it's kind of that same kind of aura of, it's a normal day and all of a sudden, all hell breaks loose. Take a look.
على محطة الكهرباء أو بالقرب من محطة الكهرباء العاصمة الأوكرانية كييف. العاصمة الأوكرانية كييف. تشدد استهداف العاصمة الأوكرانية كييف بالمسيرات الإيرانية.
Блядь. Ты не видишь его? Стреляй, если увидишь. Ой-ой-ой, боже. Летит, летит. Вот там, Олег. Готовься. Стреляй, стреляй по нему сразу. Вон летит, стреляй! Блядь, нет, он падает! Блядь, ложись! Ебать! Охуеть! Блядь, страшно нахуй! Блядь!
And so that's all that we're going to be showing here. Nuclear says seems to be a great way to help them. It seems to me a great way to help them is to give them a few phalanx CWIS. For those that don't know, the CWIS is an IDF and also a anti-aircraft system. Think of it like the gun on the Warthog or on the A10. It's essentially that, but on the ground. The whole point of it is it fires an insane amount of projectiles and it actually tracks the target across the sky until it actually impacts and actually destroys it using essentially just flak. And it tracks it using radar. Now, one of the drawbacks of the CWIS is that they are they use a lot of munitions. They use a lot of munitions. It's a Gatling gun, and it uses and it's not cheap munition either. 7.62, you can mass produce 7.62 on a pretty wide scale and shoot it through a Gatling gun, right? Like shoot it through a minigun, no problem. And you would still have a ton left over. You'll run through it pretty quick, but you'll still have a ton left over. These, not so much. These are firing, I think it's 20 millimeter. I think it's 20 millimeter rounds. I'm not a CWIS expert. I don't remember ever being around a CWIS personally. I had friends that were at Al Assad Air Base when the so I had friends at Al Assad Air Base and Erbil when the Iranians fired missiles at our bases in Erbil, in Iraq, and in Al Assad, and the CWISs did go off, but they didn't necessarily destroy every single one of those. Obviously, they still had several impact, and so it's not definite. And while it would help you still have to think about how much ammunition you're going to go through, especially with how common these attacks are, how many times they have to be refilled. You have to reload these things, and it's not a 100% effective tool. Now, I guess the Shahed drones, they might be better, but it's not 100% effective. And something that we've actually seen over the last couple of days is Russian systems actually attempting to track down and destroy S-300 batteries specifically. They seem to be actively targeting anti-air defense systems of Ukraine in order to allow for more of these systems to go through, as opposed to really before they were just hitting them when they were provided targets of opportunity. We've seen a lot of destruction of S-300 batteries, of Ukrainian S-300, and damaged S-300 batteries of Ukraine over the last few days. So that's really kind of something to keep in mind. We have a child casualty update. Quote, since the beginning of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine, 423 Ukrainian children have died and 811 children have been injured. Most victims among children are from the Donetsk region, and it's coming from the Prosecutor General's Office of Ukraine. That number is steadily climbing as this war continues, where that does not include the nearly 8,000 children that have been forcefully deported out of Ukraine and into Russia. And it does not include the over 200 children that have been declared missing and are still missing at this point. And this also likely does not include figures including those in places such as Mariupol, Volnovakha, Melitopol, Kherson, and places that are still under Russian occupation. With that, we begin to move into the battle space here, and we actually jump right over here into the Donetsk region for a daily Donetsk update. And this comes from Pavel Krylenko, the head of the Donetsk Regional Military Administration, and he says, quote, Russian aggressors fired missiles at the Donetsk region on October the 16th. 11 people were killed and 10 citizens were injured. And we can also pull this off of his official Twitter. So far, according to Pavel Krylenko, not include Volnovakha or Mariupol within the Donetsk regions or any of the occupied areas, 1,020 citizens have been killed and 2,415 citizens have been injured. And that's just since the beginning of the war. Coming over to Bakhmut. And Bakhmut is essentially destroyed. Now, we've seen quite a lot of kinetic action on the battle space here in and around Bakhmut. It's a lot of shelling, very heavy shelling, in fact, and it's a very heavy usage of incendiary munitions, which are against the Geneva Convention, for several reasons. It's not that incendiary munitions themselves are against the Geneva Conventions, it's how you use them. And using them against civilian populations and against infantry targets breaks several rules of the international humanitarian law, and also breaks listed as several different charges under war crimes, according to the Geneva Conventions, Protocol 3 of the Geneva Convention, specifically the conventions on certain conventional weapons, which I believe is in 1980, and then you have also Protocol 1 of the Geneva Conventions adopted in 1977, and overall the 1949 Geneva Conventions, of course, which are the big ones, or the Fourth Geneva Conventions. And we see that Bakhmut has been reduced to rubble. It is completely destroyed. There's really not a whole lot left of Bakhmut. It's just a smoldering pile of rubble now at this point. There's been fighting here for months, really since the beginning of the Donbass campaign. After they captured Popasna, Bakhmut immediately came under fire, and that was very early on, months and months and months ago now. And at this point, you can see the level of destruction. They still are continuing to shell it. People are still continue to lose their lives. A lot of innocent people here have not fled this area, and don't really have any intention to. If they were going to evacuate, they would have probably done it by now. The fighting has become more and more kinetic, but details are still very few and far between as to the situation in and around Bakhmut. On the Russian side, there's a lot of people saying that Bakhmut is getting ready to fall. A lot of pro-Russian individuals on social media and also from Russian sources are saying that, as well as private chat rooms and stuff on the Russian side. Ukrainian side we're still hearing that things are getting repelled, but that's about as far as that information goes, telling us the situation is still very fluid in the area. I think it's the best way to describe it. But nonetheless, we can see just how extensive the damage here is. This is coming from a Ukrainian soldier here at a gas station here on the outskirts of Bakhmut. Take a look.
Так це практично виїзд з Бахмута. І так по всьому місту йдуть тяжкі обстріли. Кожний день. Ну, так.
So that's a gas station on the outskirts of Bakhmut, kind of the situation there. And you can even hear then the explosions ongoing in the background. The shelling is constant in these regions. It is a constant shelling. It is constantly happening. There is no way around it. It is just a terrible, terrible war zone. And then here, this is actually the mayor of Bakhmut. He's at the location of one of the most recent strikes that occurred here on the 16th. Reportedly, civilians were killed, but we do not know the extent. But we just know there were civilian casualties, both wounded and killed in this incident. But you can just take a look and see kind of the destruction he's getting ready to show.
Друзья, город Бахмут. Прилетела ракета в жилой дом. Погибли люди. Поразбивало все окна. Идет реально жесткая война. Террористы русские отстреливают мирный народ. Прошу не игнорировать никого, выезжать из этого города, пока не идут боевые действия. Верю, что мы победим. Бахмут, это и есть Украина. Пусть Бог хранит всех.
So that is the mayor of Bakhmut regarding what's happening there, and some of the most recent strikes, which killed quite a significant number of civilians. So coming in from Barbara Christina. Good to see you back, by the way, there, Barbara. So she has two questions. A, shouldn't the Iranians be warned to stay out of this war and told not to sell its drones to anyone? And B, am I right to think that if just one missile can take down a plane, why can't it not take down a drone? So there's a couple of parts. So the first one is is it Iranian? Like, are the Iranians directly supporting the Russians? And why are they supporting the Russians? Why haven't they been told not to? They have been told not to. If you remember, several months ago, we actually were reporting on the fact that the Russians were going to Iran, specifically Lavrov himself, after he was kind of making diplomatic mission. And we had warned, and the world was warned as well, they are going there to check out Iranian drone systems to be bought and then used in the war in Ukraine because of Ukraine's successes with drone systems against their own forces. Russia really comes up lacking because at the time they really only had things like the Orlan 10 drone, which is mostly just a surveillance system. They don't really have loitering munitions. They really don't have a large quantity of quadcopters. They really don't have much of anything. They're really lacking in a lot of ways. And it's not just that, but basic equipment too. Optics for their rifles, really good, having any kind of ballistic protection in their plates. So this is something that happened months ago before the drones even arrived. And we had talked about they're going down there. We have video footage of Iran pulling out all of these drones to show off. We know what they're going down there to do. It's not just a diplomatic mission. It's a business. It's a business trip, and not just to shake hands and kiss babies. It's a military venture here. Fast forward several months later, we see a large influx of Iranian drones that are being used inside of the conflict zone. Iran and Russia usually support each other. Usually it's Russia supporting Iran and selling Iranian weapons, but Iran is a very competent, as best I heard it, put today. I was actually listening to some of the stuff being said on like DW and what have you, and other location and other news stories itself. And they had one of the experts on there, and he said that they are a very competent manufacturer of low-tech weaponry, is what he said. And it's very true. Iran is very competent in manufacturing lower end of the tech spectrum of weaponry. They've been supplying weapons to other locations as well. In fact, you've seen Ukrainian forces using Iranian weapons. These were seized by NATO forces when they are operating in places and stopping arms being delivered to Iran under an arms embargo. So, or being delivered to Yemen from Iran, because Iran supports the Houthi rebels in Yemen while trying to fight simultaneously. That's their way of fighting the Saudi Arabian forces that are there and part of the Saudi Arabian Middle Eastern coalition inside the country. So we've seen Iranian weapons already throughout this conflict. The drones being introduced were introduced several months ago when Lavrov and other delegates from Russia went to Iran and took a look at these drones and basically okayed that purchase. I'd say a rather minute quantity of them, and they're looking to increase the stockpile. Reportedly, according to Ukrainian sources, they're looking to purchase an additional 2,000 Shahed 136 drones, as well as additional drone systems, some of which will have a higher payload. So we do know these only come from Iran. Iran is the only one producing these. So they are really the only ones that could sell these to Russia. So Iran is pretty obviously indicated as being the individual supplying these, despite vehemently stating that they are not supplying any weapons to Russia for the war in Ukraine, stating that they have not taken a side with either warring party. It is very blatantly not true, including the fact that we see that for the Ukrainians, reportedly at this point, we don't have any very hard evidence on this. Rumored at this point, at least 50 members of the IRGC actually have gone into Ukraine to train Russian troops how to pilot these drones properly, as they were intended and as they have been built to do so, as an advise and assist group. A very small number of the RGC operates in many different parts of the globe. You never hear about it, but they operate very heavily in places, especially in the Middle East, Syria, for instance. There were 70,000 Iranian fighters when I was in Syria. I can't imagine how many there are now. Inside of Iraq as well, Yemen, of course. So it's not all that uncommon for the IRGC to end up in places that may not want to meet the public eye. So that's the first part. The second part is, kind of. Have they been told to stay out of it? Yes, and they're denying everything. They're denying any and all involvement, despite the fact that no one else builds these drones. Second part to your question there, Barbara, was, am I right to think that one missile could take down a plane? Why can it not take down a drone? Well, it's not the same. Drones are very easy relatively to shoot down, but they're very difficult. It's something that we actually had trouble with as American forces in Syria. When I got to Syria, we actually had armed drones and stuff attack our positions, and we managed to actually bring them down. Something that I learned was very effective against quadcopter drones, which is mostly what I was dealing with when I was in Syria. Not really any super high-tech stuff, but quadcopter drones used by the Islamic State. And I found that shooting at them was relatively ineffective, but using your IR laser, it was extremely effective. It burned out the camera and imaging software, or imaging equipment, hardware on the quadcopter itself, and then it forces the pilot to become disoriented and crash, which is extremely effective and doesn't waste ammunition. These drones are a little bit different than that, and so you have to use and expend ammunition. They're much smaller than an aircraft would be, and they're also very cheap is the other thing. They're very cheap. They're only about 20,000 pounds, which may not seem cheap to you or I, as someone who I would love to have 20,000 pounds laying around. That's the currency for the United Kingdom, not the weight. But I'd love to have 20,000 pounds lying around. But the fact of the matter is that for a government where you have billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars at your disposal, 20,000 pounds a piece is kind of a drop in the bucket. It's a drop in the ocean, really. And you can kind of see that with the U.S. philosophy with its military as well. The United States, supplying. There's only been about $100 billion between all countries supplying Ukraine with humanitarian, financial, and military aid. That is the total. It's just over $100 billion total that has been given to Ukraine from all countries. About 36 of them have donated funds or equipment of some type to the country. Regardless of the type, the United States military budget is $778 billion. The U.S. DoD budget alone is $778 billion, almost 8 times more than what has been given to Ukraine total from all countries. So the 20 or so billion dollars, I think it's up to $20.8 billion that we have given Ukraine at this point, as assistance in some way, shape, or form. I think that's just direct military assistance, though, is really a drop in the bucket, even for us. So it's not a lot. It's not impacting you financially, really, whatsoever. If you're an American, if you're another country, what is being supplied is not really affecting you whatsoever. It's the war itself is affecting you financially, because we live in a global society, and wars have repercussions financially and for the markets, because even if it doesn't impact a market specifically, it creates instability in those markets. It makes people more worried about wanting to invest and being more conservative about their investments, which therefore makes the dollar, it hurts it. It hurts the economy. So, but getting back on track there, they're very cheap, and missiles are usually not very cheap. They have very expensive parts and things like gyroscopes. They have gyroscopes that are used for precision. They have high explosive material. They have guidance material. They have sensors. They have all sorts of stuff. Not just the mechanical components, but a lot of the electrical components and the software that make these things are very expensive, mostly R&D, that make these missiles. So it's not very cost effective to shoot down a $20,000 drone with a $100,000 missile. That's not sustainable. That's something you have to keep in mind. Money makes the world go around, and also makes wars happen and makes them effective. Wars are won off of logistics and economies. Russia's economy cannot support the war it's fighting, nor can its logistical capabilities. But at the same time, Ukraine can't afford to expend these very valuable, very expensive, hard to replace, and very expensive to replace missiles shooting down a $20,000 drone, but it is worth it to shoot them at a $4 million aircraft, if that makes sense, whether that be a helicopter or an Su-25 or something, because it's cost effective. You can blow the Javelin, with the missile itself being worth $80,000 up towards to $120,000 a piece, just the missile, and they are fire and forget one-time use. They don't reload. It may be stupid expensive, but it destroys the $3 million tank, which is its purpose. So it's cost effective. It makes sense. So if that makes sense. So that's kind of part of it, and it's also much more difficult to identify these drones because of their size. It makes it very difficult to identify them. You need very specialized radars to identify them, so it is kind of difficult because they don't have the same kind of signature that an aircraft does, and a lot of radars are kind of based off the same thing, like Doppler. So something like this size, a quadcopter, in some cases will give off the same, depending on how its flight pattern is, will actually give off the same kind of signature as, say, a bird or something. And it's very difficult to distinguish. These are a little bit larger, but you can kind of get the point. They're not as big as a fighter jet or a helicopter. So it takes time, and people are manning these stations. You cannot forget the human factor in this either. There's delays in decision-making time, and things having to be rerouted, and phone calls that have to be made, and and there's a human factor in there too that causes delay. And while it isn't as much of a delay as it used to be, it still is a delay. And on the battlefield in a war, it's not the minutes or hours or days or months or years that matter, it's the seconds. So these things are happening in a second by second basis. Yeah. Yeah, Sci-Fi says it really well here in the live chat. And he says, what they have is working. They just don't have quite enough of them to get all of the drones. And they're saying electronics and drone countermeasure guns. 100% true. They are working. The vast majority, over 42 drones launched today. Over half of them, I think upwards of 30 of them, or 35 of them, were destroyed successfully. I think it's something like 36 drones were destroyed today by Ukraine, out of 42 launched by Russia. But the point, one of the dangerous things about drones is because they're so cheap, because they're so simple, and because they're so effective, launching them in a swarm, and this is something that the United States is worried about too, which is why a lot of things are being developed for, say, ships right now, our warships and stuff, is that using drones, as simple as quadcopters laden with explosives, with enough of them, it overloads, it saturates the airspace, it saturates your air defenses, and your air defenses can't keep up with the number of drones being fired at it, being used against it. And so while a bunch will get shot down, not all of them will. Some will get through, some will hit their targets, and depending on how good of a drone system they are, that target may be valuable and it may be very damaging to it. So that's kind of what we're seeing here. That's why you're seeing such a massive amount of drones being launched all at once and hitting so many different targets, but yet so few getting through, is they're saturating the air defenses. There's just not enough. The air defenses cannot keep up, and it's coming down to guys with rifles like police officers. But I hope that answers your questions. As we jump down here to Mariupol, the destroyed city of Mariupol has become Kadyrov's trophy, despite the fact that the TikTok army really didn't fight very much inside of Mariupol itself, and that it was mostly the separatist forces, the conscripted forces there, that mostly ended up taking most of the blunts and the bloodshed. Kadyrov has claimed the city as his own. His 23-year-old daughter, who is the Minister of Culture in Chechnya, and his 12, 13, and 15-year-old sons have come to Mariupol to rebuild a local mosque and to distribute humanitarian aid. Not sure why they need so many guns to distribute the aid. Note that his sons in this video, or in these videos, are rocking U.S. weaponry. So you can see that's the flag of Kadyrov there over the city sign of Mariupol. And here's Kadyrov's sons.
Assalamu alaikum. ويومت مريم بلعدو أوقر ناغن بدوك ما يعشوا فوندير أعمل عجيزة وداز وضربة دولشن جمن التعنفو مش شوف عدا كندو هوقر دعدا مولا ووجري نبير دوي تقول دوشلو سانهو شو عش إشمو بو عش نامو عتيك دو دوكم.
بدعت يسيني كوش باش شو معك عليه عوزر دكتور.
أغواتي الله أكبر. السلام عليكم.
So these kids are rocket. So first of all, dumb decision number one. Dumb decision number one is his kids aren't even the age to fight yet. Okay, so Russian, Ukrainian, whatever, child soldiers, not okay. Secondly, going to a tactical level, you're an idiot because you're rocking drum magazines. Drum magazines, even in the AR-15 platform, which is what all three of these kids are rocking right now. I think he might be rocking an AK platform. These two are rocking AR-15 platforms. Drum magazines in an AR-15 platform, completely unreliable, known to jam. Do they work more often than not? Yes. Are they much more reliable than they used to be? Yes. Are they still super reliable compared to a box magazine, similar to what he's carrying, a 30-round PMAC? No, they are not. In fact, I personally don't even rock PMags. I rock Snag metal magazines. The same magazines that have been used for decades. I use the newer ones that have a tan follower on the top, which allow, because the old ones with the black and green followers, their noses dive down because it's only supported in the back and not on the entirety of the magazine. For the spring it's not. It doesn't support the whole follower, just the rear. So that's none of the jamming. But I do rock Snag mags. I do not prefer P mags. I do not think they seat well. They do not work. They do not. I don't find them to be nearly as reliable as those are. But rocking a drum mag, regardless, is a really dumb tactical choice, especially in a war zone. Sure, you get a higher capacity, but you sacrifice reliability. Second of all, rocking an EOTech is super cool. Don't get me wrong. I love EOTechs. I have EOTechs on my sites. However, an EOTech or a red dot sight like that is great for a close quarters engagement. The average engagement range, especially in areas like Ukraine, the average engagement range for a firefight is about 300 meters. Your red dot sight, like what this kid is carrying, is only really good for about 100 meters or so. It's for close quarters combat. Now, what they're rocking right here, they have magnifiers, probably a 4-time or probably have a 4-power magnifier behind their red dot sight, so they can, and it's probably one of those that you can actually get cant over or whatever. That also causes it to snag, and it also can cause you to lose your zero. That's a whole other situation. But at least these kids have a power to magnify, so that way they can properly engage a target out at range. He's also probably got a fully automatic weapon, if I'm not mistaken. If he's rocking a drum mag, but he has absolutely no way of supporting his weapon system. No grip, no bipod, no grip pod, no nothing. I do not rock anything with I can't say that. I'm currently searching for some Picatinny rails right now, but I rock my stuff with a grip pod. I have a grip pod that I have always had since I went into the Marine Corps. I rock it with a grip pod. That way I can maintain stability both in the standing and in the prone, and I can engage targets kind of in a better sitting, or kind of in a great prone position with an actual supported bipod. This kid's got nothing, and if he plans on rocking this thing automatic fire, then it's not going to work. Also, you have poor trigger discipline. You two have okay trigger discipline. That's heavy. Ounces equal pounds, pounds equal pain, man. That's heavy as shit. So that's dumb, and it's cumbersome. So it makes reloads terrible. You'll get to use it once, and you'll never be able to use it again because you're going to drop it somewhere and have to bolt. And all three of these kids are better outfitted than the entire rest of the army, guaranteed. Guaranteed. Why? Because they're Kadyrov's sons. But notice they have things for their MVGs. They have the actual mounts for their MVGs. Absolutely, I guarantee they don't have MVGs. But not very. That's my assessment of Kadyrov's sons and their idiocy. Let's see, can I spot anything else? Yeah. No one has ever told these kids about tourniquets. Actually, no. He's got one on his bottom right. But a tourniquet, you should always keep a tourniquet somewhere where it's easily visible. He's got the right idea. Don't see any tourniquets on these two. So if you get shot, you are definitely going to have a really rough time, because if no one can find a tourniquet for you, you're going to bleed out and die. You got about a minute and a half before someone bleeds out and dies from blood loss if they're hitting an arterial wound. So yeah. Let's see. Anything else that I hate about these kids' shit? Yeah, get your frickin' finger off the trigger there, bud. He's rocking a suppressor. That's not, unless you're trying to be tactical. He's not going to be. He's not going to be doing so hot. I think he's rocking an AK platform, but he's rocking a suppressor on this. It may be tactical, but it ain't all that. It ain't all it's up to be. Okay, and also suppressors have a limited lifetime for those that didn't know. Yeah. So, what's my point in doing all of this? First of all, it's child soldiers, it's never an okay thing. Let's get that. War's terrible enough. Do we really have to put kids into this? Like, I look at like 18-year-old, like as a 25-year-old, right? I look at 18-year-olds that were coming in the Marine Corps, my junior guys, and they were kids, right? Like, that's hard enough to deal with. 14, 15-year-old kids? 14, 15-year-old kids? And by the way, I don't care. Their father, Kadyrov fought with the Chechens. He was a Chechen. Now he's a Kadyrovite. But he was a Chechen. He fought with the Chechens, and then he switched sides after the first Battle of Grozny, and took part on the Russian side in the second Battle of Grozny. I don't care what your dad did or how well he did it. I do not care. I like to think I was really good at my job. It doesn't necessarily mean you should train your children how to do it and then send them off to war. Furthermore, just because you think you still got it, I know I don't have it anymore. And I haven't been out that long enough. I haven't really been out that long, but I know there's stuff I have forgotten. Right? So it sets up these kids for failure. Active military personnel aren't getting nearly enough training. These kids aren't getting enough training, that's for sure. And they're gearheads. They're tactical. They're not tactical, right? They're not actually tactical. They're tactical. See these? See these little clips? Do you see any tape there? No. Why? Because they don't know. They're plastic. They break. You tape it so it doesn't move. Right here. Right on your shoulder. Right on the front of your flak. Put a tourniquet on there. Why? Because everyone can see your tourniquet. It's easy to remove. I brought my own flak out here and showed you. You don't have to wear dark sunglasses every single where you go. It makes you look tactical, but it actually can obscure your vision depending on the lighting. These types of headphones, while I may have tinnitus and hearing loss in both of my ears, these headphones, you can't hear commands and everything else that's being yelled at you. The first thing in combat you do not think about is putting your ear pro on. That's the reality of the matter. They're tactical, they're not tactical. They're gearheads, they have no idea what they're doing, and the first minute they get in the combat, they're going to get themselves killed. And Kadyrov will have lost all three of his sons in the process because he thought they were ready to go. Don't send your kids to war. It's a terrible, terrible idea. Wait until they're grown men, can make that decision on their own, foolish or not, but don't send your kids to war. It's a terrible idea, and it's a terrible thing to do. And he's a terrible father. I have no problem calling him out on that. And if all three of his sons get killed because of him, that's his own fault. His bloodline was weak, and it will not survive the winter. And that's his 23-year-old daughter. In charge of culture. It's a lot of guns for handing out humanitarian aid, by the way. Notice all these big burly men who have to stand around his sons. By the way, these guys are also equally worthless. Kadyrovites are worthless in combat. Chechens, amazing in combat. Terrifying, honestly. If you've ever seen videos of the First and the Second Chechen War, absolutely terrifying. I would hate to fight against them. It's like fighting an actually good Islamic State. It's terrifying to think about, the prospect. But the Kadyrovites, not at all. The Kadyrovites are a joke. 108 Ukrainian women were returned to Ukraine in another prisoner swap. 11 officers, 85 private sergeants, and 37 other miscellaneous prisoners of war from the Azovstal plant. Andriy Yermak was said they will receive medical care and rehabilitation. So this is them being released from the from captivity. You can see the photo of all of them there. It's very awesome to get to see these kinds of things, because there's so much pretty terrible stuff that's happening throughout this war. It's just kind of nice to see some uplifting stuff every once in a while.
Еще раз, девчонки! Мы чекаем! Еще раз, девчонки!
Daniel DeWing says, "Don't sugarcoat it. Tell us how you really feel." No problem. I have no problem telling you how I really feel. So one of the reasons why I started this, I'm not here to sugarcoat things. I'm just here to tell you what's happening.
Я так не знаю.
Мы не... О, отлично, наслись. Все хорошо.
Все нормально, муж у нас, знаешь, муж у нас все ждет в Киеве. Мы сейчас вас забираем.
Мы, наверное, не знаем.
Все, едем. Что? Я знаю. Мы всех заберем.
Добрый вечер.
Давай.
Fantastic to see. Welcome back home, ladies. You know, we've heard how terrible that the war is already. And we've heard about how terrible filtration systems are. They're concentration camps. And we've heard about how much that sexual assault and rape in this war are being used at a level of it's a weapon. It's being used as a weapon. And hundreds of Ukrainian women who have been sexually assaulted and raped that survived mind you, these are the survivors, have testified and have laid out their stories for the world to hear and read about this. And I cannot imagine what these women had to go through as a POW in Russian captivity. I cannot imagine at all how terrible that must be. I mean, it's hard to imagine Russian captivity, period. But I cannot imagine how terrible that has to be. So, it's unfathomable what they've had to endure. No updates in the Kherson Oblast. There is a media blackout regarding the Kherson Oblast. Normally, for those of us that like this channel, which are very plainly Ukrainian bias, that usually means good things getting ready to come. The Kherson Oblast has some pressure. There's a lot of people posting things about watermelons lately. So I'm sure we're going to be seeing, hopefully, some very good things coming out of the Kherson Oblast. But usually that means very large counteroffensives. And you don't want to be giving away operational security information to the general public while these things are going on. So if we are expecting Kherson to go very quiet and very dark for some time. It's already been a few days at this point. We really haven't seen anything out of Kherson over the last few days. We're not expecting to until that has been lifted. It usually will last at least a week. So we will see. We're monitoring the situation as best we can with all of our sources, but there isn't anything coming out right now. So it's been very clear that there's a media blackout in this area. A Shahed 136 drone, the same ones that were attacking areas such as Kiev today, was actually captured by Ukrainian forces. Ukrainian forces managed to shoot down and capture a Shahed 136 kamikaze drone nearly completely intact near Kobeliv within the Mykolaiv Oblast. This will provide valuable insights into how the Shahed 136 works, and it will therefore allow them to kind of learn how to counter these systems in the best way possible, how they track, how they work, their inner workings, what type of engine they use, their explosive makeup, everything else about them that may not be public knowledge. So capturing things like this is always good. It's a huge intelligence win for them, and it appears that it fell right into the sea where it likely didn't seem to have a major detonation that caused the destruction of the system itself. So take a look. And I did see the nose cone, so it is a 100% intact Shahed 136 drone. So it is a completely intact Shahed 136. So that's going to be a huge intel win for them, and hopefully we'll see it. We'll hopefully see Ukraine learning how to counter this new menace here very shortly as a result. And then out of Odessa, we have a couple of grain corridor updates. Quote, on October the 16th, 4 more ships left Ukrainian ports Odessa and Privdeni through the grain corridor. 140,000 tons of Ukrainian agricultural products are on board, heading to countries of Africa. And that's coming from Sergei Bradchuk, the spokesman of the Odessa Regional Military Administration. And quote, on October the 17th, 5 more ships left Ukrainian ports Odessa, Chernomorsk, and Privdeni through the grain corridor. 122,300 tons of Ukrainian agricultural products are on board, heading to countries of Europe, Asia, and Africa. That's coming from the Ministry of Infrastructure. And the Ministry of Infrastructure actually gives us these updates as well. We can see from the Black Sea Grain Initiative here under the Ministry of Agriculture. We can see those 4 loads, 140,000 tons of agricultural products. Under the grain initiative, as of yesterday, 1.1 million tons of foodstuff have been exported to Africa. 5 ships chartered by the WFP have already left the ports of Great Odessa. And we can see that again here. With some of these Chola Treasure and General Polon Hashimov, which is both of these are getting ready to put out to sea. They were loaded. Overall, 7.8 million tons of foodstuff that have been shipped to Asia, Europe, and Africa on board over 350 ships. And we can actually see one of those ships as it has arrived. This is here. This is 51,400 tons of Ukrainian wheat carried by Super Henry is being unloaded in Mombasa port. Meanwhile, today, a third vessel loaded wheat for Kenya and has departed from Ukrainian ports. We continue to provide African countries with Ukrainian grain. More than 1.1 million tons has been exported for today. So, Super Henry there. The ship is currently being unloaded there in Kenya at the port of Mombasa. And that's actually all the updates for Ukraine itself. Don't worry, there's plenty of other stuff as well. There's just a ton of stuff happening throughout the world that also has to deal with Ukraine too. So we're actually going to immediately roll into our international news here, and we actually start off with what's happening up here and to the north of Ukraine and in Belarus. So we'll start with this one. This is, I've seen a lot of countries that have the worst dictatorships and the worst militaries in the world always try to overcompensate. It's the little man syndrome mentality. You see North Korea do this, where they have like this crazy military demonstration where dudes are like breaking bricks with their heads and just stuff that no one needs to know or care about in the military, but they think it's cool and it makes them look like hard, like they're, really badass or something. Well, we got one of those, except it's kind of a sad version of that, and it's coming from Belarus. Take a look. You cannot make this stuff up. This is the Belarusian military training for provocations made by Ukraine. Provocations made by Ukraine. This is the Belarusian military. This is exactly what I mean. They're fake fighting. These guys lit a jump rope on fire. He's now doing push-ups and jumping over the rope doing push-ups. Does anyone need... This guy's just constant... please, sir, lock your knees and pass out. Do any of these guys... See? This kind of thing. At what point is this situation ever going to come up in your military career? You need two guys to lift up a guy, to put a cinder block on, a block of concrete in plaster, and then you're going to need to light it on fire with your local vodka, and then break it with a sledgehammer. When? And name me one situation you will ever find in combat in which case that is a requirement. Or that. None of this, you don't need to do any of this in combat. You know what by the way, you know what that's called? You know what this formation's called? A machine gunner's wet dream in a sucking chest wound getting ready to happen. That is what this is called. Like, and by the way, get your goddamn rifles out of the sand. You idiots. They try to show off, and they're shoving their AKs in the sand. Do you know what happens when sand gets into the muzzle of your rifle? You get to go and fire it, and guess what? It explodes in your face. We know. Trust me. There was a kid who was training in Kuwait. When I was there, He did that. He laid his rifle in the sand, went up, put his rifle into his shoulder, went to fire, and it blew up in his face. It was quite interesting because I got to see it at the armory 2 days later. You're idiots. They said it's their Iwo Jima moment. Yeah, okay. You see, on Iwo Jima, they actually had to fight to do that. And they were actually winning at something. Even though it was 5 days into the battle, and the battle would rage for another 31 more. Check out the flash mob. Lukashenko is at to steal Kadyrov's TikTok title. So, Belarusians are now the new TikTok brigades. Someone please explain to me what is going on here. This seems like a really big waste of smoke grenades. Colored smoke grenades. To begin with. Why? So, before this even starts... Yes, it's cheerleading practice. Before this even starts, you have green smoke, you have 2 pairs of people in, like, Taekwondo, like, judo, whatever the outfit is called. I'm sorry, I'm not... If you do that stuff, like, that's cool. Like, it's cool, and martial arts is a thing in like, even the Marine Corps. We have our own type of martial arts in the Marine Corps. But, like, this, like, they're just fighting. They have green smoke happening everywhere. This guy is just shooting blanks into the air. This guy is just patrolling. He looks like he's an ISIS fighter out here patrolling with his PKM. And he's got another one, and they're wearing the black schmogs over their heads. Tactical over here. I have no idea what this gaggle is doing. But half their uniforms don't even seem to fit. They're really baggy.
Доброе утро, мы из Беларуси. Доброе утро.
I am muted. I am sorry. That definitely works. So we're doing it live, folks. So I don't understand. So we have what, 3 groups of people in the back sparring. We have 2 ISIS guys in the middle of a gaggle. We have a guy shooting rounds off to the beat for no real reason. We have a bunch of relatively scantily clad individuals with their face painted for no apparent reason while wearing a really colorful blue beret and a vest and essentially nothing else, doing a bunch of terrible moves to the music while a bunch of green and red colored smoke from smoke grenades goes off around them. I would have zero faith in my military if this was happening. I would have no faith. I would not have joined the Marine Corps if that was the recruitment ad, never would have joined the Marine Corps ever. Doesn't matter how good they are, doesn't matter how big their record is. If that was the recruitment ad, I would never be able to take it seriously. I would no. Now that makes nothing I have seen the Belarusians do militarily at this point has even given me any kind of hope. Everyone in their country should be terrified that they did not have enough body bags. They will have to use their beloved potato sacks in Belarus as body bags, I swear to God. There's no hope for them. They will be worse than the Russians will. I swear it. That tells me everything I need to know. There's not a single actually good military incompetent military on the face of the earth that actually shows off like that has yet to not get its ass kicked. This is a Clan ZF moment right here. Yeah, no kidding. No wonder the poll said that 6% of Belarusians believed that their military would turn around and invade Belarus if they were ordered to invade Ukraine. Yeah, I 100% can believe that. But yeah, no competence. I have zero confidence. There's just such a low chance that Belarus actually does anything militarily viable at all in this war. If they join this war, I would be terrified if that was my military. They're not good. It's not good. It's not. There's no country. North Korea does stuff like that. When was the last time you saw North Korea be competent in something militarily? Okay, it's run by an angry madman who shoots missiles over Japan for no reason. However, that doesn't mean that Belarus isn't trying. We do see some actual serious stuff coming out of Belarus, besides that cluster of whatever I just watched. These are new markings that were spotted in armor that were moving here throughout Belarus, and there have been convoys that have been spotted, as well as other stuff happening throughout Belarus. But it's kind of been hit or miss with what's exactly happening. But we see a lot of train equipment here. So what you're seeing is these are triangle insignias. These are new invasion markers. As you may remember, every vehicle painted with a V or a Z or whatever the hell the Russians are doing, a circle with a line through it, makes it look like a no smoking sign. Originally, it was thought that this was based off the Axis advance and the type of unit that was doing that Axis advance. For instance, the Spetsnaz would have their own insignias, but say the Sumy, as well as the Kiev Axis of Advance, they had their own insignia, while the Kharkiv had its own insignia, that kind of thing. And what this is a new type. This one appears to be a triangle with the number 2 in the center of it. Not quite sure what this one is designated, or if this is just designating a new type of battle group that is being put together, because the more and more this war goes on, it will appear that each of these insignias seems to actually be more or less correlated to the army it's going to. So you have like 1st Army, 2nd Army, 3rd Army of the Russian Federation, and these battle groups that are being put together, as opposed to actually designating just the Axis. It just happened to be, 1st Army was taking the north, 2nd Army was taking the Kharkiv and kind of the northeast, and then you had like 3rd Army taking the south, and each of them had their own invasion insignias. This one could easily designate that, and it kind of goes along with also seeing 3rd Army. 3rd Army actually came in if you may remember, they built a third army. It was very much under strength. And got to Ukraine and was 80% combat ineffective within the first 72 hours of arriving in country. So it seems they had their own insignia. So I think that's kind of what we're actually leaning towards here. Is it just happens to be that's what army was on the axis of advance, a certain axis of advance, a certain part of the front, as opposed to actually being, say, there being an actual. That's just designating the axis of advance. It seems still an invasion marker, though. But it's a triangle with the number 2 in the center of it, is what we're seeing. And we're seeing out of Orsha, of course, is right here on the border between Russia and Belarus, that we're seeing more equipment heading into Russia. Quite a significant number of it, in fact. And we continue to see this rolling into the country. Rolling into Russia, quite significant. There's also been reports of fighter aircraft, Russian Federation fighter aircraft, flying over Belarusian cities over the last few days, but we don't have any good confirmation on that to say for sure that that is in fact happening, to give us any indicator on what's happening on multiple echelons of the advance. We're just kind of seeing the logistical edge of it, and a very minimal look at that as well. But take a look. So no audio with this, but these are... Ooh, is that a BTR 60? Hold on. Alrighty. That looks like a BTR 60. Now, let's see. BTR 80. No, it's a BTR 70. Yes. Well... Yes, it's a BTR 70 is what this one is. Yeah. So it's a BTR 70 that they're using here. No, it's not a BTR 60, it's a BTR 70. BTR 60 has 3 rings. Has 3 step-up rings down here on both, or except on the driver's side, or on the actual exiting side. No, sorry, it has 3 step-ups on both sides with a small hatch in the center on the right-hand side of the vehicle, which you can't see here. But there's 3 rings down here. You can see these 2 square-ended rings right here. These are step-ups, so you can step onto these and then step up onto the vehicle. And then it's also square at the bottom. So that's kind of the quick way to do it. Also, the BTR 60 has a different exhaust system on the back of it. So, okay, so I'll show you out of my manual here. So this is a BTR. So this is a BTR 60. For those that don't know, you can see the, if I can get my finger in here, the 3 step-up rings here on the back. And you can also see the exhaust system, which actually comes out the back but goes downward on it. Whereas on a BTR 70, which is this one, you can see the 2 step-ups, and then which is right here and right here in between the road wheels, and you can see that straight back, but it doesn't have any rivets in it, like any notches in it. So that's the exhaust. It's just a straight flat piece of metal, if that makes sense. So that's a BTR 60 versus a BTR 70. They maintain the same kind of armament, a PKT 762 and a KPV 14.5 millimeter. I think that some BTR 60s also mount an AGS 17 40 millimeter grenade launcher as well, which is the Russian version of the Mark 19. BTR 80s have a similar setup, but it has a much smaller turret. Actually, no. Those are BTR 80s. Yes. Yeah. Nope. BTR 70s. I'm sticking to it. Sorry. Anyway, continuing on with the actual video. Is the 14.5 any good for a cannon? It really doesn't have a significant increase in capability past the 12.7 millimeter. So for those that don't know, 12.7 millimeter is a 50 caliber round. Essentially is what it is. The Russians use 12.7 by 108, while the United States and NATO uses 12.7 by 99. So they have just a slightly bigger round. And that's usually the 12.7 108 is used in, say, like Dishkas and stuff. The KPSV, or KPVST or something like that. Anyway, it's a 14.5. It's a 14.5 millimeter machine gun. The capability of it really doesn't have a whole lot of a difference between its capability and that of the of any Dishkas or any other types of weapon systems they're actually going to put in these things. Now you got me looking. Oh, whatever. But anyway, yeah. So for those that don't know, that's actually my book from training. So on that bookshelf behind me, anytime I'm talking about these technical things, on that bookshelf behind me, and I have some next to me too. Like for instance, this one or these couple here. I have this is the 50 cal manual for the M2 and M2A1. I have PVS 14 manuals, and I have all sorts of them. I have duplicates of some of them. But I keep a whole shelf, so that all that entire bottom shelf there is nothing but manuals and stuff that I got from when I was in the Marine Corps and that I have tactically acquired, so I can go through and actually actually know what I'm talking about, or try to know what I'm talking about anyway. But I was able to acquire a lot of stuff, and I have a Saber manual for the tow systems. I have a Javelin manual. I have all sorts of stuff back there, and not necessarily the ones you can always get online, because I think the only one you can get online is the most common one is the 2003 manual for the M98A1 system. But I also have but there's another one I think that is scarcely available, but you can find the 2008 version. But I have the newest one. I pulled it right out of a brand new Javelin pack. Anyway, we move over here into Russia, where we see armored bras essentially being provided to troops. So take a look at these vests. These are bulletproof vests. Bulletproof vests. These are strike plates. These are plate carriers. Not even like a plate carrier rig like my plate. No, these are literally just the plate and some basic stuff. Like, it's basically a bra armored plating. It's an extra small tactical vest. Take a look.
Давай. Вот, выдали нам сегодня супер бронежилеты. Страйкбольные. Защищают от пневматики. И собираются посылать на Украину. В этом говне. Это подарки от Рубени. Каски китайского образца. Тоже непонятного происхождения и производства. Из чего сделано, ничего не понятно. Сплошная показуха кругом. Ничего реального не показывают нигде. А кто знает, может, на Украине страйкбольными...
Давай.
Well, the big fur hat's because he's Russian there, Rooster. But, yeah. You know, they tell you to shoot center mass. There's quite a lot of center mass to shoot at, which is why they tell you that. So, here's the thing. this is covering like his heart and his lungs, right? Which like a sucking chest wound and like tension pneumothorax like sucks, right? Tension pneumothorax is where you get a wound in there's an open space in your ribs between where your lung is and the actual rib cage. There's kind of an open space there. It's called the ventricle, if I'm not mistaken. And if you get shot, air can get trapped into there, and it puts pressure onto your lungs, and it can kill you eventually. And blood can leak into there too. That's called tension hemothorax, and then if both get in there, it's called tension pneumothorax. And there's a way to get rid of it, but like that sucks, right? And you can get sucking chest wounds, which is pretty much what causes that. And you know, like your heart's there, so there's important stuff here. But one of the slowest, most painful ways to die is to be shot in the stomach. It will take you hours to die, but it will kill you. Being shot in the stomach is a terrible way to die. It's excruciatingly painful, and it's excruciatingly slow. Plate carriers should protect all of you. It should protect the whole front and back of you, and preferably it should have side plates. Now, this likely is a light Kevlar weave, if any kind of a Kevlar weave, or similar type of weave, whatever they have in Russia. And the plate that he's probably going to be getting, as we've seen, can literally be folded with your hands. That is what we have seen issued to the Russian troops. The Ukrainian troops are pulling plates out of these plate carriers that they are literally folding with their bare hands. They are so terrible. They will not stop anything. Once again, it's a comfort item more than it is an actually useful one. And this isn't even going to protect him from really anything. I mean, sure, it's going to keep him from being shot in the chest, but there's a lot of other space to shoot somebody. And if you're going to shoot, you're probably going to shoot low less than you're going to shoot high. You know, if I'm aiming at you like standing, I'm going to start low and work my way up personally. Because I'd rather make sure I have the most amount of area that I'm going to shoot. Now, that being said, like I've trained to shoot you in the chest, right? Like two to the chest, one to the head. You know, your failure to stop drill, a controlled pair to the chest. You know, that kind of thing. So, and I'm very capable at that. So I do most of the time aim for the chest. But in a situation, you might not always have that choice. So there's a lot of area to protect, and this shooting down here, bursting the appendix, shooting them in the stomach, you know, you can hit them in the kidneys, you can do all sorts of stuff below the chest line, below where the rib cage already protects. That a lot of that will still kill you. William Young says recoil puts muzzle higher, always aim lower first, at least in video games. So the that's coming from William Young. It's not really a video game. It is true. The higher, so it depends on the ergonomics of the weapon system. But it's definitely much more true in video games. Video games really exaggerate recoil quite significantly just in an attempt to balance gameplay. But most weapon systems aren't going to kick quite like you think they're going to kick. My rifle is an MP15. It's 5.56, 5.56 NATO, and it's the same one. It's same kind of video I trained with. I trained with an M4 carbine for most of my military career outside of boot camp. The boot camp's the only time I carried the M16A4. Regardless, it doesn't really have any recoil to it. No real significant amount of recoil. Anytime someone says there's so much kick to it, not really. It just means that you don't have experience shooting at all. And I had no experience. I had never fired a firearm at all before I went into the Marine Corps. Never once fired a firearm when I went into the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps was my introduction to firearms, and I really didn't feel any kick my first time shooting it. And I'm not a big guy. Like I went in, I was 168 pounds when I went into the Marine Corps, and I pretty much kept that weight the whole time I was in. So I'm not a huge guy either. Like I'm not particularly extra strong or anything. I just pretty average. In some regards, I'd say even below average. So it didn't really bother me. So it gets really extremely exaggerated. So in M4, you can put around on target. And if they're within 50 meters, like a close range engagement, they're within 50 meters, I don't even aim. I put the rifle in the center of my chest and I shoot over my scope. I don't aim. I just put it in the center of my chest because if you're within 50 meters, whatever I'm pointing at is where the bullet's going to go. So whenever I'm clearing houses, most of the time I'm not worried about that. Unless I'm holding long security down a hallway or something, I'm not aiming down my scope at all. It's just not worth it. It's a lot easier. Plus, I'd much rather be able to shoot the wall or something and pepper you shrapnel and disorient you before I hit you. That way, I get the round off first. Sci-Fi says saw a video where Ukrainians test Russian plate armor and bullets did the bullet with bullets. It did stop a sidearm, but the rifle went through two of them with one bullet. Yeah, sidearms most of the time. The plates that I'm starting to see. At this point, that was the early one. That was the actual steel one. I'm seeing stuff even thinner than that. That is not. It's not. It's not. It's not. It wouldn't stop a sidearm. Jump down here into Moscow. Mobilization in Moscow is over. Lucky men missed finding out that mobilization in their district had been canceled moments before they went and signed the documents. Take a look.
Закончена мобилизация в Москве в принципе?
В Москве, да. Все, за 5 на поле.
Отлично, спасибо.
Все свободны.
Yeah, so the guy came out, said mobilization's over. So all those guys that hadn't signed their paper yet, nope, don't gotta mobilize. Go home. And he Fair says War and Peace by Trollstoy would be more fitting. Yeah, actually, I think about anything you could loot and shove into your plate carrier in Ukraine would probably work better than the plates that are being given. I seriously believe that their plates are actually ass. They do not work. They are paper thin. Paper thin. It is ridiculous to see. But yes, War and Peace would work really well. If you've ever seen the book War and Peace, it's a brick. It's huge. It would definitely stop a round. Maybe at least a sidearm. It would stop a sidearm. I don't know how you cannot. I don't know how can you not question when you handed a cardboard thin plate. Yeah, that is the question. It's a comfort item. I think they're handed them with the plates inside the flax and just never told how to check them. I swear, or they're sewn in or something. Because you gotta see, they cut them out. The Ukrainians are cutting these plates out. I think they're sewn in. I don't think you can remove them like our plates. You can. So I can remove my plates and make sure they're clean and clean the inside and everything. But I also maintain two plates. I maintain hard plates. I maintain hard plates, and then to protect against sparring off of my plates, and also to protect against if I'm not running to run plates. I use soft armor, which is a Kevlar weave armor that that protects against 9mm, 45, that kind of stuff. Not really anything bigger than a 45. It won't really protect against it, but I carry soft armor, and then I carry actual plate armor, but I don't carry like level 4A, or I don't carry like level 4 plus plates. I carry level 3 and stuff. I don't want to shell out the money for them, but I'm not expecting to become engaged First rule of war, don't get hit. I'm not trying to get engaged or anything, and I live in the civilian world now, so I'm not really all that worried about that. Most of the time, if someone's going to do something, it's going to be a handgun. So here in Russia, it would appear that it's faster than Vegas. This is crazier than Vegas, and I've been to Vegas quite a few times. I've done some pretty wild stuff in Vegas, actually. But this is mass marrying. Because of mobilization, they are mass marrying people in giant services. Couples are just filing in, and they all get married all at the same time. Take a look. It's crazy.
Брак регистрируют не раньше, чем через месяц после подачи заявления. В исключительных случаях закон позволяет гражданам расписываться за один день. Для этого должны быть особые обстоятельства. Совсем недавно в перечень уважительных причин для ускоренной регистрации добавилось наличие мобилизационного предписания. Сегодня мы присутствуем на уникальном массовом процессе бракосочетания. И это главное отличие. Но вопросы к парам у ведущей церемонии остаются все те же. На своем добровольном
Man, look at all those widows.
согласии молодые сообщали с места.
Раскурин Александр Сергеевич.
Да.
Прокопьева Ольга Витальевна.
Да.
Тиденко Александр Ильич.
Да.
Нахват Полина Викторовна.
Да.
Смирнов Денис Валерьевич.
Да.
Смирнова Валентина Евгеньевна.
Да.
По вашему
Where's Elvis? Oh, that takes the cake there, Daniel. That takes the cake. Where's Elvis? I was about to say William Young, because William said men selling their death benefits to get laid one final time. Yeah, no kidding, right? Reminds me of the title 3 weddings and a funeral. Hey, that 1 million ruble check isn't gonna cash itself. Oh Jesus! Look at all them girls with their new ladas. I know this is supposed to be a news stream and we're talking about serious topics, but man, you guys are pretty funny. But yeah, anyway, so they're mass marrying here because they're doing the boot thing. It's a boot thing, but it happens. But yeah, it's Oh, where's Elvis? It's a great question. A Russian jet slammed into an apartment building here in Yeysk and Krasnodar Krai, which is over here by Rostov-on-Don. The Russian jet, it was a Sukhoi Su-34, which ended up slamming into an apartment building, a residential apartment building, and killed at least 6 people and wounded 19 others. Reportedly, the pilot was able to eject, but the co-pilot was not. They said the Ministry of Defense of Russia, as well as the emergency situations, stated that the jet was training and not carrying missiles. Regardless, it was one hell of a fireball. And this is coming from RIA Novosti, here, their official Telegram channel. So this is where it took place. Obviously, we already saw that on the map. Look at that! Look at that explosion. And look at that guy who now... Look at the one lonely parachute. You know, if you're going to slam your jet into an apartment building, could you at least die with the plane? Because now that guy's got to live with the fact he just massacred a bunch of Russian people. It's a great photo, though. Yes, it is a fantastic photo. But can you imagine being this guy? William Young, if that was training, I think the pilot failed. I think the pilot at least P2'd, if not P3'd this training, yes. Success. Here's the aftermath.
Может быть.
Потому что я видела парашюты.
ЧП есть. Это самолет упал.
Самолет упал?
Да.
Ну я поняла, потому что парашюты я видела.
Так там же, блядь, ракеты, ёб твою мать, там люди.
Написали, да, что самолет?
Да и какой? Кружит вот второй.
Значит, самолет, лякнутый.
А там пиропатроны у него.
So, yeah, and Rooster Burns says, what a photo, I'd die with the plane. 100%. Can you imagine being that guy as he's coming down, what the thought is going through his head? That's something I am genuinely curious as to know what the thought in his head was after he ejected from the aircraft. And you gotta think how many aircraft accidents there are, right? Like, you gotta think how many aircraft accidents there are, like, in the United States. Like, we've had jets crash all the time. We have fighter jets that happen. I shouldn't say all the time, but we have fighter jets crash, you know, and it happens. And sometimes they don't crash in good places, right? Like, you don't anticipate when a jet's going to crash or an aircraft's going to crash. But generally speaking, the pilots in the United States do everything physically possible to specifically avoid slamming into an apartment building. Normally, they don't eject unless they're over an open area and can safely do so without causing any injuries to anybody else. So that's what Jet doing. Here's some of the aftermath.
Видно возгорание топлива с одного из баков. К сожалению, вот здесь больше видны разрушения дома. Это просто ужасно, скажем так.
Also, props to being the greatest commander of an aircraft ever, making sure he ejected and his co-pilot did not. Huh. Oof. That's just... Down here in Krasnodar, though, what Air Force doing? Air Force is 9/11ing their own apartment buildings, apparently, in Russia. So, we saw the weddings. That's great. Now it's time for the funerals. Just coming out of Krasnodar. And they lived about that long, too. You think I'm kidding. There was a photo published on the internet of a Russian soldier, and he was throwing up a peace sign, or a victory sign, whichever you want to call it, and he had a bunch of explosive reactive armor stuck to the front of his truck. And then, like 8 hours later, after that photo was published, they published the exact same photo in his local newspaper. He'd been killed in action. Can't imagine why. But 8.5 hours between the time he posted that photo and the time he was killed. 8.5 hours. So, glad to see that mobilization is going really, really successfully. So, you know, whenever someone brings up the argument to me, what do you mean 300,000 troops aren't going to make a difference on the battlefield? They're putting explosive reactive armor to the front of their trucks. It's built for tanks. Tanks have the equivalent of a meter thick of armor with a slope angle. Not your pickup truck. Not your Kamaz. No, 300,000 troops aren't going to make a difference because they're dumber than hell and they're killing themselves faster than the Ukrainians are killing them. It's pretty hard times over here in Yakutsk, and the reason why is Yakutsk is the same one that said for every mobilized individuals, they would give them a sheep, or they would give them a lamb or a goat for every mobilized man. This is also over by the same region that would also give them 10 kilograms, or either 5 or 10 kilograms of fish. And anyway, the mayor of the city announced the aid for families of deployed men. The one-time assistance package consists of cabbage, potatoes, carrots, onions, and beets. Looks like they're out of fish and sheep already.
Октября месяца семьи мобилизованных горожан могут обратиться в Центр поддержки семей участников за единоразовым продуктовым набором, состоящим из свежих овощей. Это капуста, картофель, морковь, свекла, лук. Все выращено в пригородах города Якутска. В случае необходимости волонтеры доставят их до вашего домашнего адреса. В течение октября...
William Young says ERA at front just means a hit equals no engine left. That would be true if there was an engine at the front of a KYIV truck. Let's see if I can find the photo. Soldier puts explosives on truck. Oh, seriously, you're not gonna pull up that photo out of all photos? This is not the first one coming up. Explosive reactive armor on truck. No, it's not wanting to pull up the photo. That's really, really frustrating. Because it's an absolutely hilarious photo. I wonder. Let's see here. We might have it in Ukraine. We might have it from the last one. No playground, no problem. Sorry, I'm trying to find this because I really want to show you. This is absolutely hilarious. German office on fire. Where is it? Let's see. Do we have it listed somewhere else? No, we don't. Okay. I'm giving up on this endeavor. But anyway, yes, it's a bunch of guys that are basically, it's a dude. He's sitting in front of his KYIV truck with his fingers up like this, and he's got like 8 sticks of ERA stuck to the front of his KYIV truck, and it's just you can't do that. That's just strapping explosives to yourself to strap explosives to yourself. Anyway, we leave Russia and all of the craziness that is Russia. And anyway, France will train up to 2,000 Ukrainian troops. Defense Minister Sebastian Lecornu told Le Parisien. Soldiers of the armed forces of Ukraine will be seconded to the French units for several weeks. According to him, Presidential Emmanuel Macron has already approved this plan. The minister also said that France will transfer Croatel anti-aircraft missile systems (SAM) to Ukraine. Their number is being agreed with the Ukrainians, but it will be significant to allow them to defend their skies. And that's the system that they're talking about. And up here in Manchester, a very interesting development. Pro-Hong Kong protesters were assaulted by Chinese embassy employees. Police are investigating the assault. Chinese embassy refused to comment on the matter. The Chinese quote, the Chinese consulate, in response to the BBC, criticized the protesters as a small bunch of Hong Kong independence advocates and said that no consulate would tolerate people displaying images that insult Xi. Quote, this would be intolerable and unacceptable for any diplomatic and consular missions of any country. Therefore, we condemn this deplorable act in strong indignation and firm opposition, and the consulates told BBC. The person being dragged into the embassy, remember, though, this individual was not inside the embassy. No, the Chinese went out and dragged him into embassy grounds where there is no longer jurisdiction of the United Kingdom, and then beat them. They dragged them into the embassy, reported his hair was ripped out from his scalp, and he was bleeding from his face and heavily bruised. They dragged him from the United Kingdom territory into the Chinese embassy to beat him. Because the United Kingdom doesn't have any authority in the Chinese consulate. Because an embassy is considered the sovereign territory of whatever country that embassy belongs to. So if you're in the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad, you are in the United States. You follow American laws. You're in the United States of America. It is the United States, it's U.S. territory. The Chinese consulate in Manchester, that's Chinese. It's Chinese territory. It's Chinese land, Chinese laws. So they brought in this Hong Kong protester, dragged him out through the gate, and then beat him inside the consulate before throwing him back out. And if you think I'm kidding, here's the video.
UK police are investigating the apparent assault of a Hong Kong pro-democracy protester who was pulled into Chinese consular grounds and beaten. The incident happened during a demonstration against Chinese President Xi Jinping on Sunday in the city of Manchester in northwest England. In a video posted online by the BBC, a man in a black cap and a ponytail can be seen being hauled by several men through a gate into Chinese consular grounds. The protester, known as Bob, is then kicked and punched by 5 men as he lies on the floor. Police at the scene eventually step in to free him. A Greater Manchester police spokesperson told Reuters police inquiries were ongoing into the circumstances. They added that their officers responded immediately to defuse the situation. Speaking after the incident to the BBC, Bob, who has recently emigrated from Hong Kong, said the protest was peaceful.
Several people from the Chinese consulate came out and destroyed our belongings. When we tried to stop them, they dragged me in and then punched and kicked me. Later, the British police pulled me out again. It's unreasonable and should not be done, because we have the freedom to express things. This is the reason why we came out to protest. The so-called government of Hong Kong says we are thugs. What are people in your government in China doing now? Who are the thugs? We are a peaceful demonstration. Why beat us?
Britain's Foreign Office did not immediately respond to a request for comment. In a post on Twitter, Alicia Kearns, a Conservative Member of Parliament and head of the Foreign Affairs Committee, has called on the Chinese ambassador to be summoned.
Yeah. So Chinese embassy employees came out, destroyed their protest outside the bounds of the embassy, which is then the United Kingdom territory, and then grabbed him and then beat him. And that's the image that they had. If you want more information on that, you can go to the BBC.com. If it was in the U.S., we may accidentally bomb a Chinese embassy 5 times again. So that technically is kidnapping, by the way. So sci-fi is not wrong. It is technically kidnapping. You're technically taking him from one territory and jurisdiction and bringing them into the territory and jurisdiction of another country, and then beating them, which is against the Geneva Conventions and is unlawful detainment. So yeah, that 100% is an international incident between the United Kingdom and the Chinese. And by the way, yeah, 100%. Yeah, I would kick the Chinese consulate out of China. I would kick them out of the United Kingdom. If I was in that position, I would kick the Chinese out of my country. Get out. Get out of my country. I am closing your embassy. Get out of my country. I am revoking your diplomatic mission. Get out of the United Kingdom. 100%, that's what I would do. Because you can't do that. Protesters, violent protesters, came to the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad, right? Came to the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad. Iraqi citizens. And they were violent. They were throwing Molotov cocktails. They were doing all sorts of stuff. And throwing rocks at us, using the David and Goliath slingshot. And injuring people. They had weapons on them. They're throwing Molotov cocktails. They're lighting gas stations on fire. They were doing all sorts of really, really bad things. And they had broken through the embassy and burned down everything. And you know what? Until they got into the embassy grounds, or were on the walls of the embassy, on the walls, on the rooftops, and inside of the buildings that they had breached and burned down, we didn't do anything. Easily could have. In fact, we had enough live ammunition, we could have taken care of the protest pretty quickly, but we didn't. Because it's not the correct thing to do. It's not how you deal with that kind of situation. They're protesting and they have pictures. I have been told to go die in a hole by so many people of foreign countries when I was at the embassy. I got told to, death to America and all that stuff to my face. And once they got inside the embassy compound, or got on top of the wall of the embassy, I hit them with a 12 gauge non-lethal round. Or I threw a flashbang. Or whatever. But I didn't go outside and drag protesters in and start beating them. And could have gone lethal, didn't. So, there's a way to do things, there's a way not to do things. No, I don't think a country of any embassy, I don't think, this would be intolerable. This would be intolerable and unacceptable for any diplomatic and consular mission of any country. Yeah, bullshit. I can tell you that's because I was part of a mission. And those people were actually violent. It did want to cause me harm. And I still treated them with better respect until I physically could not for my own safety. Rooster Cyburn says China is becoming a global menace. I'm I'm not going to comment. We move over here and into the Middle East where the Russians are at again. Russian aerospace forces struck northern Aleppo province. The Russian aerospace forces launched airstrikes on the settlement of Kafar Janeh and Katma in the north of the Aleppo province. Earlier, additional units of the Turkish armed forces arrived in the city of Kafar Janeh following the end of the conflict between their proxies. And you see some of the smoke rising there in the distance from the strikes. The strikes of the Russian Air Force hit the headquarters of the Syrian National Army militants, including groups from the Sakura Ashramiya group, who were on the side of the HTS, and the leaders of the pro-Turkish formations admitted to the death of 3 militants, and several more were injured. So you get to see some of the aftermath here. And so that's the situation there. However, fighting did start back up again between the 3rd Corps of the Syrian National Army and the HTS. Fighting resumed in the areas of the cities of Afrin and Kafar Janeh. Artillery is being used on both sides, and both sides accuse each other of violating a previously reached agreement.
استهداف تجمع البركي بقذائف مدفعية من قبل المجاهدين الأبطال. اللهم لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. يا رب دروب ارمي عاجت يمينك دروب. يا رب سترك. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله.
الله أكبر الله أكبر. حد أصابه شيء يا شباب؟
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أكبر يا بطل.
For anyone curious to know, that's a ZSU-23 Tech 2 anti-aircraft gun. It's twin 23mm cannons that are mounted on the back of them. They have a really high rate of fire. And this one is mounted into the back of a 1991 Toyota Hilux.
الله أكبر. أمن الله أكبر.
Now, I know everyone associates Allah Akbar with the Islamic State because of the extreme, and I know it's kind of an ongoing joke, but it's actually a serious thing. So religion is deeply tied with every group here, and it goes clear into their language. So for them, whenever they're shooting these things, right? Whenever this stuff's going, they're screaming Allahu Akbar, which means God is great in Arabic. And then they also say things, like Inshallah. Inshallah means if God wills it. And so it's actually a serious thing. Religion plays a huge part, not just in their personal, spiritual lives, but clear down and into their language. So that's why you're always hearing that, is because it's a very. They say it when they're excited, like. You hear it a lot in the middle of combat, no matter who is talking in these regions. And that's what a 14.5 millimeter machine gun looks like. As a result of the fighting, a refugee camp of Tagamu al-Baraka also came under attack. Fearing becoming victims of the class, civilians were forced to leave the settlement. You can see that they're hiding there. Did anywhere they can. Keep in mind, these are refugee camps. They don't have anything left. They already lost it all. Over here in northern Iraq, mass rallies are being held. In northern Syria, mass rallies are held against the presence of the Hayat Tahrir al-Asham, or the HTS, in settlements. The demonstrators shouted insulting slogans at the leader of the gang, Abu Muhammad al-Julani, and demanded that the militants of the group immediately leave the province of Aleppo. It also turned to Turkey to expand its presence in the northwestern part of Syria. Against this background, the mosques of the city of Al-Bab and a number of other settlements, there were calls for mobilization to counter HTS expansion. So you can see the protests ongoing. So as you can see, quite a large number of people. And the Su-34 crash that happened in Russia just had a casualty update coming from our researcher Fair, who said it's up to 13 dead and 19 injured in just the one apartment. Down here in the southern part of Syria, 3 Islamic State militants were killed during a counterterrorism operation. Southwest of Syria, during a counterterrorism operation in the province of Daraa, the security forces eliminated 3 militants of the Islamic State. The operation took place near Jassim, where the jihadists had taken refuge in a house, opened fire on the military. Arriving at the scene of the incident, additional forces started a firefight with the Islamic State and then blew up the building. One of the neutralized terrorists turned out to be the group's field commander, and he was responsible for arming the ISIS cells in Daraa. They have a series of photos here, if my mouse would like to stop lagging. You know, everyone may hate each other, but they all hate the Islamic State more. Nobody likes Daesh. No one likes Daesh. The Saudi crown prince's cousin, man, ain't that a mouthful, and threatens the West with jihad and martyrdom. In his video message, the Prince Saud al-Shalam said, anyone who challenges the existence of this kingdom, know that we are the sons projects of jihad and martyrdom. The prince delivered in a warning in English and French, according to Saudi human rights activist Abdullah Alaoud, Saud al-Shalan is a tribal leader and grandson of King Abdulaziz, the founder of Saudi Arabia. His statements come at a time when tensions between the United States and Saudi Arabia have really reached a climax.
ردنا على الغرب نفس الكلام هذا نعيده بالإنجليزية. Anybody that challenges the existence of this country and this kingdom, all of us, we are projects of jihad and martyrdom. That's my message to anybody that thinks that he can threaten us. On dit en français, بالفرنسية, celui qui challenge l'Arabie Saoudite, que ça soit le royaume ou le peuple, nous sommes un projet de martyrs pour la patrie et pour Dieu.
So touch is getting a little bit hi there. I can imagine, so is he a member of the royal family of Saudi Arabia? Yes, technically, but he's a tribal leader. He's not, it's not like the crown prince of Saudi Arabia saying something. It's Sacha Baron Cohen. No, it's not Borat. As funny as it would be, it's not Borat. And Borat is he's from Kazakhstan. Oh, okay, there we go. We have an update coming out of Pakistan on the malaria outbreak. From January through August 2022, more than 3.4 million suspected cases of malaria were reported in Pakistan, compared to with these 2.6 million suspected cases reported in 2021. Balochistan and Sindh provinces accounted for 78% of the confirmed cases after the floods in mid-June 2022. Reports from 62 high-burden districts indicated that additional 211,000 cases were reported in September, and compared to the 179,000 cases reported in the same districts in August of 2022. WHO has assisted in distribution of long-lasting insecticide nets, mobilized rapid diagnostic tests, and anti-malarial medicines. And for anyone that wants more information, you can check out the World Health Organization International. Let's see here. We go over here in Southeast Asia, where we see that a sports climbing athlete has disappeared after competing without his job. Iranian sport climber Elnaz Rakabi, 33, who competed without the Islamic headscarf at the International Federation of Sports Climbing Asian Championships in Seoul on Sunday, has gone missing. It was reported that Ms. Rakabi's passport and IDs were confiscated, and it was speculated that Ms. Rakabi might be relocated to the Iranian consulate in South Korea, or might have already arrived back in Iran and is being detained.
이란의 엘라지 레캅입니다. 레카비 선수가 볼더에서 77점을 얻으면서 레카비 선수 아까 볼더 끝나고 잠깐 쉬는 시간에 본인이 못 풀었던 볼더 문제 아쉬워서 혼자 나와서 다시 뭐 다음 아시안 게임 또 올림픽에서도 8명의 선수 점프 왼손 잘 잡았습니다. 네, 오가영 선수가 왔던 지점까지 이제 거의 도달을 했습니다. 자, 레캅이 몸을 잘 비틀었고, 아하, 저 작은 홀드를 잡지는 못했습니다. 이렇게 되면 레캅이 선수는 75.1까지 기록이 될 것 같네요.
네, 그렇습니다.
Anyway, she did not compete with a hijab, and now she has mysteriously disappeared as an Iranian national. I can't imagine who would be behind that. Japan offered equipment to restore energy in Ukraine. Japan is ready to provide assistance to Ukraine in the restoration of energy infrastructure damaged or destroyed as a result of hostilities. Okay, from Nexta. So they're ready to provide equipment for Ukraine to restore power. Up in Ethiopia, the fighting does continue. The Ethiopian and Eritrean forces have captured Tigray's city of Shire on Monday. Ethiopian Air Force also bombed a residential area in the town of Alamata Monday morning, killing and injuring civilians. The United Nations, African Union, and U.S. State Department called for an immediate ceasefire, which Tigray regional government repeatedly stated readiness for a ceasefire and called for the resumption of humanitarian aid. Ethiopian government declared on Monday to resume immediate control of all airports and cities in Tigray in order to protect Ethiopia's sovereignty and territorial integrity. The Shire has been shelled multiple times over the past few days, which led to the many civilian deaths, including one staff member of the International Rescue Committee who died on 10/15 from injuries sustained on an attack back on 10/14. And that's coming from the government of Addis Ababa. I'm seeing quite a high number of casualties within this region, mostly among civilians.
The war on Tigray has seen horrendous atrocities amounting to war crimes and genocide. The people of Kunama, an ethnic minority in the region, have suffered unspeakable horrors under the occupation of allied Ethiopian and Eritrean forces. We spoke to members of the community who say Eritrean troops have continued carrying out their genocidal rampages on the people of Kunama.
They looted farm of the community.
And so this is coming from Tigray TV, but the United Nations has also agreed that ethnic cleansing is ongoing against the people of the Tigray region. So, yes, is Tigray, which is obviously from Tigray, they would be the ones to report that, not just being local, but also, have experiencing that, and that being the hot story in their area. Once again, that narrative thing that you always want to talk about when you're looking at possible misinformation. But the United Nations correlated this fact. Eritrean and Ethiopian troops continue to bomb civilians knowingly and willfully, and they continue doing so, causing a massive amount of people being killed, a lot of civilians. And the government of Tigray has been willing to conduct a ceasefire and allow humanitarian aid to come in there. The perpetrators, the groups that are causing it, they're causing the humanitarian disaster. 90% of people in the Tigray region in Ethiopia require humanitarian aid just to survive. And it's not the Tigray rebels that are keeping that humanitarian aid from coming through. The difficulty is coming from the forces of Eritrea in Ethiopia. It's the government in Ethiopia that is making it difficult for humanitarian aid workers to get there. It was difficult when it was difficult before the war started. It was difficult when the war started. It was difficult when the war kind of stalled out, and it's even more difficult now that the war has restarted. The government is perpetrating this. They're continuing this. It's not the people of Tigray. The people of Tigray, yes. Is it horrific on both sides? And is there ethnic cleansing on both sides to an extent? Yes, there is. But we're seeing the governments of Eritrea and Ethiopia just mercilessly killing a ton of innocent people. It is insane to think about. And they're willing to let this entire region starve to death to accomplish their goals. Down here in the south, this is coming out of the Cabo Delgado province. Rwandan armed forces assisting Mozambique found Islamic State weapons caches within the Cabo Delgado province. The military personnel of the Rwandan armed forces discovered a cache of Islamic State weapons. The impressive arsenal was found in near the Imbo district of the province of Cabo Delgado. The militants built the cache back in 2021 and then retreated from the district under the onslaught of the Rwandan military. According to the plans of the security forces, they have having lost their weapons. It will be more difficult for the militants to use the district for organizing a guerrilla war. However, Islamic State continues to be very active within Mozambique. Yeah, that is completely true. You can see the government forces of the armed forces of Rwanda here. You can see just how terrible condition these weapon systems really are. They truly are absolutely terrible condition. These are not fit for service whatsoever. I can't even say any of these would fire. Wow, they have knee mortars. That's a knee mortar for anyone that may not know. I didn't even know. Is there any? No. No, it's not. Okay. I thought it was a Japanese knee mortar, but a Japanese knee mortar only goes so high. It cuts off up here. Sorry. I was very interested to see if that was exactly what I think. But that little, it's a knee mortar. It's a very small mortar round. And finally, we jump over here into the United States with the serious news here. And today is the International Day for the Eradication of Poverty, coming out of the United Nations headquarters. The theme of 2022 International Day of Eradication of Poverty is dignity for all in practice. 1.3 billion people still live in multidimensional poverty, with almost half of them being children and youth. COVID-19 and Russia's invasion of Ukraine reversed the reducing trend of poverty since 1990. It's estimated that 7% of the world's population will still be struggling in extreme poverty in 2030. And it's coming from the World Bank South Asia. Coming from the UN and Sweden. United Nations OCH. If you want more information, you can check out the United Nations website and on their observances. But the last bit of news we have for the night is kind of the uplifting and interesting news ongoing, and actually is coming out of Syria, which is very interesting indeed. And that news is actually that a 1,600-year-old mosaic of Hercules and Neptune's 40 mistresses was unearthed in Syria. Archaeologists in Syria have unearthed a stunning mosaic from the Roman era that features events from the Trojan War, the chiseled muscles of Roman demigod Hercules, and a powerful ancient Roman god Neptune alongside his 40 mistresses. 40 of his mistresses. The General Directorate of Antiquities and Museums, a Syrian government agency, discovered the 65.5 foot long and 20 foot wide, or 20 by 6 meters, mural in Rastan, a town in central Syria near Homs. The agency uncovered the well-preserved mural, painstakingly made in ancient times, with colorful stones that each measured about 0.5 by 0.5 inches, or half an inch by half an inch, or 1.2 by 1.2 centimeters across, in a building, and that was held by Civil War rebels until 2018, when the Syrian government forces took back the town. The ancient ruins under the building are still undergoing excavation. We can see some of this here. Very, very well preserved and beautiful mural, especially when you consider everything that's happened inside of Syria and the history behind this and the immense amount of destruction that happened even before this war. But it's quite impressive. It's pretty cool to see something like that. So well preserved. Very beautiful artwork. Very beautiful artwork. But alas, that is everything for the night. That's all of the news that we have, at least reporting in the last 48 hours from throughout the globe. And so with that, obviously, the point of this is to raise awareness of things that are happening throughout this world and to raise awareness for a lot of these terrible situations. So, please, I implore you to take some time and jump down to the video description and help us support our endeavors with trying to help these people and to give back to these communities and to these people in need. Check out in the video description, you're going to see a ton of different organizations down there. We're vetting a bunch submitted by you guys as the community to get even more added. 80% or more of all of the donations they receive actually go to their programs and actually go to helping people. And past that, they're all credible. So make sure that you can donate to them safely. And if you can't give a lot, please give a little. And if you can't give anything at all, that's fine too. Help us grow this project. The more people we reach, the more of an impact we have. And so please help us continue to grow. Give us a like, subscribe, let your friends know about us, share you amongst your communities. And we'll be able to do even more good and help even more people going through some pretty terrible crises throughout the world. But with that, I hope that you, your family, and your friends remain safe. And if not, I do hope that you find that safety and security in the very near future. Have a wonderful Tuesday. I hope that it's very fulfilling for you in whatever endeavor you may be going through. And hope you have a wonderful Wednesday as well. We will be back for another 48 hours of news covered on Wednesday night at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 p.m. Central. So we hope to see you back once again for yet another news story. But my name is Paul from the New News, and have a fantastic rest of your night, everybody.
Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять до волновахи, і чудно кличе діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТРО. Нам не треба ні конфлікту, ні війни. Та ми готові всіх вас звать до сатани. Тисячі вже полягло, і все більше шлепуйло. То для них нема нічого, крім труни. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять до волновахи, і чудно кличе діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТРО. Вызволять пришел, братишка, ну привет. На моей земле тебе один ответ. Нашим людям с кирпичом, даже танки не пощем. Вам не взять нас из за сотню тысяч лет. Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріляду в новах і чудно кличі діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО.
Mr. Putin, on behalf of all our guys, no one's scared of your nuclear device. You can take your double lemon, shove it up your wrinkled bum. Oh, we'll come and help you fit it in your skull.
Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріляду в новах і чудно кличі діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріляду в новах і чудно кличі діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо